Thank you.
Privilege.
I was just thanking Mante for you guys giving my film a home in Lithuania
It's a great pleasure. It's a great honor, and
and
it's
for
really
being the
special for
first
us.
country outside of North America to release the film.
Because the other countries are going to be a little bit later, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so we have a lot of questions, I think, but as I said, we have a bit limited time. But anyway, let's maybe start. And what I wanted to start is actually from the origin of the film. If you could tell us a bit more how it all started in your thinking. Was it from the specific story about the election moment, this shift of in your country, or was it more that you have this idea about the gun and the monk and this whole travel thing?
Well, first of all, Bhutan, my country, is one of the most unique countries and unique cultures in the world. We are a country, as you saw in the film, we were the last country to connect to the internet. We were the last country in the world to allow television. And we are probably one of the only countries in the world where democracy was introduced without war, without revolution, and people didn't want it actually. And Bhutan, the reasons why these changes were like that in Bhutan was because in Bhutan, Buddhism is very, very core to our belief, to our culture, the way we think. For example, whenever I go around and I tell I'm Bhutanese, the next question is usually about whether I am happy, because Bhutan is known as the happy country. We have many strange rules, for example, because we believe that happiness of the self is only achieved when causes and conditions for happiness are externally established. So, for example, it is in our constitution that the forest coverage of our country cannot drop below 65%. It has to be above 65%, and right now it is around 72%. It is also in our constitution that mountain climbing is illegal. So we have Himalayan mountains, the greatest peaks in the world, but they are unclimbed and they will remain unclimbed because we believe that our environment, our culture, our trees, our mountains have to be kept, pure and clean, and only then we will become, the happiness that we all seek will be achieved. So we are a country and culture that is rooted like this, which is very, very unique. And I think the catalyst for this story to come, to be made is actually my own background, because I come from a unique culture like this, but I'm really a citizen of the world. I was born in India. I grew up in Bhutan. I grew up in Europe. I grew up in Switzerland, in Geneva. I grew up in the Middle East. I studied my college in America. So I was really a citizen of the world. And in Bhutan, we have this beautiful saying that, one can never see our own eyelashes because they are so close to us. And I think a lot of these changes that were taking place in Bhutan, for most Bhutanese, they would just see it like, oh, it's just our way of life. But for me, because I was a Bhutanese, but I was also, brought up in the outside world, I was in this unique position to see my own eyelashes. So, because of my upbringing, I think whatever I was noticing happening in my country, I thought, wow, this is so unique. Here I am studying political science in America, where democracy is seen as the greatest gift of them all, You know how the Americans are. We will go to Iraq and liberate them. We will go to Afghanistan and liberate them and give them the gift of democracy. That kind of notion is there. But for me, coming from my culture where democracy was being given and everyone was like, what? We don't want this. I thought that made such a unique story. And that was my inspiration to make the story. I felt like the world needed to know about the unique circumstances of how Bhutan became a modern country. But also I wanted to preserve this story for future generations of Bhutanese, to know where we came from, so we might know where we are going next.
And you mentioned this already and explained a bit about this peacefulness of the process. Sorry, which I think is really someone watching your film really can learn a lot about this whole peaceful process. And maybe you could tell a bit more how this shift happened and how people actually reacted. We see that a bit in the film, but it's only like in the beginning. But maybe you could a bit about what's when actually the election started to happen, how it was.
Also one of the reasons why I wanted to make this film is I think this story of democracy that is really, I think, said around the world is almost like, oh, if the country is not democratic, then that ruler must be the dictator, It is kind of like the norm, the expected norm, right? I think the interpretation of how there is a country, a society where there is one ruler and he is loved by all his citizens, it doesn't kind of exist in the modern mindset. And for Bhutan, it was this, that's what made Bhutan so unique. And the people did not want democracy exactly for this, because they were happy, they were content. The country was, everyone was happy with where the country was and the stability the country had. And but then the thing is, with all the things I was saying about television, internet, it almost became like Bhutan was the only non-modern entity in a modern world. And that stubbornness to cling on to the ways of the past, to tradition, to culture. How long were we, expected to keep away television, for example? How long were we supposed to stay without internet? It in the end, it doesn't work, right? So all these changes that you see in the film happened not because people wanted it, but because it was needed for us to keep up with the rest of the world. Otherwise we would become irrelevant. And as I tried to show in the film, yes, as a filmmaker, both with Lunana Ayak in the classroom and The Monk and the Gun, I draw a lot of inspiration from actual events. And a lot of the reactions that you see in the film, I actually, remember that happening, and I actually interviewed people to get true accounts. And yes, democracy was not a popular move. When the king introduced it, no one wanted it. The mock election that we see in the movie actually happened. And yes, the Yellow Party actually won, And even now, we have had maybe 3 rounds, 4 rounds of elections. And even now, if you go around Bhutanese towns, and then we just had our election maybe a month ago. And if even at that time, I was in America at that time, and I called my family and my friends and, other people in Bhutan. And I said, who are you voting for? And they said, probably this person. And I said, why? And he said, because he will serve the king the best. So it's still like that. And, it's a very different, I think, a very, very different idea, right? And I think, wishing to share that with the world is important, because it's a very refreshing, very, as you said, peaceful idea. Something that I also wanted to stress in this movie, with the stories that you see, is the quality of innocence. If you all come to Bhutan, you will notice this. And I tried to show this in the movie. When I first showed this movie to some people in the West, they said, oh, Paul, certain scenes is difficult to, believe that. Or people wouldn't, not knowing their birthday, or people getting a lot of money for the gun and giving it up. That wouldn't happen. And I said that will happen in Bhutan, because the Bhutanese people are very innocent. And innocence is a very beautiful quality of being Bhutanese. But then at the same time, when you become modern, when you open yourself up to all these concepts and these notions, it's very difficult to remain innocent, because to be innocent is then seen as being ignorant, right? And we are told to shed that away. So, yeah.
And you spoke a bit about this introduction of TV and internet, and you also comment a bit about the influence of US, of Western culture to Bhutan, like by showing Coca-Cola's Blackwater and James Bond. And I wanted to know, does this influence come from TV and internet, or has this influence has a longer story?
You know, to be frank, even though Bhutan, you know, did not allow television or did not allow internet, there was still that influence kind of like infiltrating our culture. For example, you know, a lot of people, me included, my family included, when TV was not allowed, we still had TV, but we had to hide it, you know. So when I was a kid, my father and mother had a small satellite dish to get TV, you know, and then because it was not allowed, the satellite dish was spray painted green, and we would hide it in the vegetable garden, hidden amongst chili plants. And with that satellite dish, we got connected to MTV, we got connected to HBO, and that was kind of like the first glimpse that the Bhutanese people had to what the outside modern world was. And I think at that, you know, even now, the modern culture is very, very dominated by especially American culture, you know, like MTV, like HBO, you know, when you turn on the TV, you would see James Bond, you know, I mean, yeah, it's a British story, but still it's, you know, it's a Hollywood production. You would see movies like Rambo, you know, you would see Eminem rapping, you know, on MTV. And I think for many cultures, many countries, like for example, take Lithuania, you all will not have a point in your history where you will be like, okay, this is the day when Lithuania opened its doors and got outside information and outside influence, you know. But in Bhutan, we can say, oh, it was this year when the king said, I allow television. And when it is so, you know, protected and guarded, and when it is opened up all of a sudden, the impact of that new influx of culture is much, much stronger than, say, in Lithuania, where it was a very gradual process. So yes, you know, American pop culture became very, very important, very influential. And I tried to show that, you know, people were selling their cows, and this is true, selling their cows for TV. Homes that had the best TV became where all the villagers would gather. And as I showed in the movie, Buddhist deities, pictures of the Buddhas were taken off and replaced by, you know, Western American pop cultural icons like, you know, I show in the film.
And wanted to ask another thing about Bhutanese storytelling, because probably all the long-lasting countries and cultures has their own way of storytelling. I wanted to know what it is in Bhutan and whether you applying this traditional storytelling in your films.
Oh, yes, definitely. You know, being a culture that is so rooted in our tradition, in our spirituality, we are a very oral society. The stories, you know, are passed down from ancestors all the way. And in a way, this is why I became a filmmaker, because I love stories. I grew up with stories, you know, stories of, you know, I can vividly remember as a child growing up in eastern Bhutan in the villages where there was no electricity. We would have a small kerosene lantern, you know, in the kitchen. And then we have no gas. We have big wood in these stoves to cook our dinners. And around that fire with the smell of kerosene, stories being told by our parents, by our grandparents about, you know, our culture, our society, our traditions, you know, the values that we hold dear. And I think I always say this, that storytelling is so important in Bhutan, so important that it doesn't even have a word, you know. In English, I'd be like, tell me a story. Please tell me a story. In our language, because we don't have a word, it would be, please untie a knot for me. You know, a knot.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, that's because the act of telling a story for the Bhutanese is not for time pass. It is not for entertainment, but it has that higher purpose of untying, of freeing, of liberating. So in a way, every time a Bhutanese, relates to a story or is engaged in the act of storytelling, it always has that higher motivation, you could say, to untie, to free. And as I've always said, in Bhutan, the Bhutanese culture is very much based on the Buddha's teachings. And even the Buddha himself said, in our language, the word for art, creation of art, and actually film story is art. The creation of the word for art in our language is jutsel, which actually means illusion, falsehood. The art and storytelling creativity is the creation of falsehood and illusion. And the purpose of creating this falsehood and illusion is so that this illusion and this falsehood acts as a medium that makes the people connect to the truth, to the real reality. So there is a very important storytelling aspect, but it has a very, very different motivation. The why it's being told, you could say, is always that higher purpose.
Very beautiful, this saying of untying a knot. Very nice. And to come back a bit more to the film itself, how did you choose the specific village, the location of the film? Were you researching some other locations, or you knew this village and you thought that, okay, this is the place where I want to shoot my next film?
Well, my first film, I shot it in Lunana, which is, I think, one of the most remotest human settlements in the world. We went through a lot to make that film. It's like a 10-day trek over the mountains. There's no electricity, there's no telephone network, there is no hot water, there is no hotels. It was really, really difficult, And with this next film, when I told my crew members that I was planning to make a new film, there was many requests from them, please keep us in civilization this time. We want proper beds, we want telephone, we want internet. And of course, this story, it didn't require for us to be that remote. So, I think that made the choice of the locations easier. But I come from the valley of Bumtang, where the story takes place. And for me, I really wanted to do something in that valley because it is home for me. But also, I wanted to shoot in Ura because Ura is one of it's a culturally protected village in Bhutan. And if you see in some of the establishing shots, it is a little settlement that is kind of nestled in this valley, It's a very picturesque valley. And I wanted to shoot it where, once we got there, we would get 95% of our, shots. We don't have to be crisscrossing to different valleys and different villages. I wanted to go there and then shoot most of the rural scenes there and then go back into the city to shoot what was needed in the urban shots. So that was one of the reasons. And also, this particular valley, in a short span of time, you can see the change of seasons quite a lot. And I wanted that because I always wanted to end the story with the blooming of the buckwheat blossoms at the end and begin the story with, the brown wheat. So kind of like, the change coming, hope in the at the end, and this village was able to give me that.
And in some interviews, you talked a bit about that, so I read, but I wanted to ask a bit more in detail because you work with non-professional actors, and Lau was the real Lama of that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just say a bit more. Was the filmmaking something very new to them, and how did you work with them? Or they had some kind of idea how is film done, and they could participate easily?
It's much easier this time than with Lunana. With Lunana, most of our actors, they had never been out of their village, so they had no idea what cinema was, what film was. But for a lot of the people in the village of Ura, they knew films, they knew cinema, they knew about what I do, so it was easier. But then sometimes when they have a certain concept, then it becomes the obstacle,
Yeah.
with Lunana, because they were so blank, they had no concept, whether you put a cow or a yak or a camera in front of them, they would have the same reaction. But then with people in Ura, they know, so they have a certain concept. But it helped that most of them were playing themselves. As you said correctly, the Lama was the Lama of the village, and when I met him, he was building a stupa, so it kind of worked that way. But I think working with the non-professionals in Bhutan, it's a challenge, because yes, our film industry is very small, that we don't have professionally trained actors. But at the same time, I think if you are willing to embrace these challenges, things that are seemingly challenges can actually become a positive for you, So I think, yes, sometimes when you work with non-professional actors, it's a challenge. Performance might not be there, but then you can get to this very special, magical place where performance meets authenticity. And I think many times in The Monk and the Gun, we were able to tap into that special place where authenticity is there as well.
Maybe Aista or Modesta has some questions. I don't want to take all the time.
I would like to ask, unless Modesta wants. But actually, I have two questions. First of all, there's something that you said about the opening of Bhutan to the rest of the world, which was the exact point. So compared with Lithuania, I think we can also say that a certain point in our history, which was the breaking of the Soviet Union and the opening of the Iron Curtain, that was a specific point. But then what was happening before? The lack of freedom to access not only goods but also culture coming from the West and from the other side of the Iron Curtain was creating a huge opposition to the government, and which is, I think, completely opposite to what you're saying about Bhutan, that people were not having the things that they wanted, but they were somehow happy. And can you say what this, I mean, how is it possible? Because we have completely different experience.
Yes. I think this really fundamentally comes down in the difference in the culture of Bhutan and of Lithuania. Because Bhutan, we are, as I show in the movie, there is no Bhutanese culture without Buddhism. And in Buddhism, as I said, Bhutan is also this one country that always aspires to be happy. We even have a department of happiness. Can you believe that? I think many countries will find that very strange. As a country, as a government, we aspire to be happy, not to be wealthy. And so for as long as I can remember, happiness has always been a core foundation of Bhutanese culture. But then, because it is happiness based on Buddhism, the definitions of happiness is very different. When I think for the rest of the world, I think it's widely accepted that wealth equals happiness, But then in Bhutan, yes, wealth equals happiness, but then it is this wealth does not mean materialistic wealth. It means contentment. It means a sense of contentment. And if you have that sense of contentment, then you're happy. And at that time, I think pre the modernization of Bhutan, people were very content. And that contentment also came because they didn't know of the outside world, right? And they were kind of very content in their little, little balloon. And you could say, yes, we opened up, as I said earlier, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. And when you open up and then the floodgates are open, that sense of contentment is gone, right? As I said, innocence and ignorance. And then suddenly, people are told that to be innocent is to be ignorant. And then when you are faced in trying to be a country that's pursuing happiness based on contentment, while the rest of the world is pursuing materialistic happiness, and you're a poor country, then it poses, different problems. Now Bhutan, yes, we are still aspiring to be a happy country, but then we have economic problems. Unemployment is high. Depression is growing. There's huge migration of people away from Bhutan to other countries. So, there are actual problems. But I still say with a lot of pride that I come from a country that places happiness still above everything else.
Mm-hmm. One more question I have is because Lunana was, we all know about the glorious Lunana's success, and this film was also in the shortlist for quite a while for the Oscar nomination for the best foreign film. And you've been traveling with the film in US, and at the same time, this is very, let's say, dangerous film when it comes to its topics. And nowadays, when we are facing so many world problems related with the lack of democracy in some of the countries, and then your film is in a way subtly touching this very sensitive topic. So how was it for you to travel in US
when I made this film, even from the script writing stages all the way to actually shooting and editing, something that our team always reminded ourselves was that we wanted this film to really we wanted to smoothen out the edges. I didn't want this film to come out and then I didn't want people to think, oh, this film is pro-democracy, or this film is anti-democracy, or this film is glorifying the Bhutanese, system, all that. I didn't want it. I wanted it to be a story about Bhutan. And when the people watched it, I hope that it could be a mirror upon which the audience's own values, stories, wishes could reflect upon, And I was very conscious about that. And, when we screened the film, for example, in Telluride Film Festival, I think it was the second screening, there were a number of people who had come to watch this film. And in Telluride, there are a lot of people from Texas, and there were a lot of, for example, NRA members, the National Rifle Association in America, and they had come to watch it. I was very curious. I was like, what will they think of this film? I wonder if they will come out thinking, oh, we hate this story, it's making fun of us. But they came out of the cinema and they really enjoyed it. They said this is a wonderful film, and this it teaches us a lot about our own culture, and I thought that was very special. And then, of course, as you said, during the Oscar campaign, one of the biggest champions for this film was filmmaker Michael Moore, who is a huge anti-gun person. And he loved the film. And, we had wonderful conversations about the film, about the themes of the film. And I think he said it very beautifully. He said this film teaches us Americans about being Americans without having anything to do with us. And I'm aware that right now with issues going around the world, it touches upon a sensitive topic. But as I said earlier, I also wanted to use this film to kind of show the world, yes, here's a different kind of take on this issue. But as you all might agree, this is a very casual, it's a very light-hearted take, telling the story of a very unique country, unique culture, and their journey to this. And that's still my hope. It's still my hope that when people watch this, they get, and it's like a medium of reflection.
Yeah, I think it works, and it's really like nice, this touch of sense of humor in your film, and this whole light-hearted feeling that people can reflect about difficult and interesting topics, but with a very kind of light approach, which I think is very, very beautiful in your film, which we really enjoyed, all three of us, when we were watching the film.
Thank you.
I'm thinking to bring it into Lithuania. So
also around election time.
What was that?
Also around election time, when I think that there's so many elections taking place around the world.
Yes. Before we end, I want to say one thing, and that is about the phallus in the movie. I think many people will find that a little bit, amusing. But for me, everything in this film is very symbolic, and it's there for a reason. You have to understand that in Bhutan, we are a Vajrayana Buddhist country. So the ultimate goal of all Bhutanese is to achieve enlightenment. And what is the biggest obstacle to enlightenment? That is having concepts, duality, So in Bhutan, basically it's like this. We believe that if you have water in your ears, you put more water in your ears to get the water out. So having concepts and having duality is the obstacle. Then what we will do is we will keep putting you in situations where you are faced with duality and concepts until you realize that there is no duality and concepts. So you see a wooden phallus, it makes you feel uncomfortable. Then we will keep showing you this wooden phallus until you realize that, oh, there is no duality. So, when I was growing up in Bhutan, wooden phalluses was a very important aspect of our culture. Wherever you go, you would see wooden phalluses hanging in the doorway, hanging in shopping malls, hanging in the hospital, in the offices, everywhere, temples. But then something I noticed as a Bhutanese was that after we became a modern country, the phalluses disappeared because we Bhutanese suddenly became very, we became ashamed, you could say, embarrassed. When the foreigners came into Bhutan, we became embarrassed that we were a culture that celebrated wooden penises, and it disappeared. So in the movie, when we were writing the script, I thought, okay, if the guy wants a gun, then if he can't get the gun, then he should get this instead. And in a way, it's my way of bringing relevance back to something that was lost as Bhutan became a modern country.
Great. Thank you so much for the context and explanation. And really wanted to say thank you for finding time and talking.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. For filmmakers like us coming from a country like Bhutan, getting people like you all to believe in our films, to put the effort to bring it to theaters, it inspires us. What is an artist without an audience to to inspire them? So thank you for this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck with your new things, whatever you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yes, maybe next time you can come in person.
Oh yes, yes.
It would be amazing.
I was just telling her that I'm I'm a big basketball fan, and I used to watch Arvydas Sabonis. So I know that Lithuania produces a lot of basketball players.
And I love the fact that your dog was facing us, as if he's trained
right
to
here.
Participate in the video call.
This is Gucci, like Gucci. The bag, Gucci.
It was nice to be with you. Thank you very much.
Yes, likewise. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.